Sure, killing's one of many, but it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all solution.
She's here to change the world.
Though the killing part's also much easier now that I'm honest with myself about it.
I'm just here to help.
Hey, what's up you guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Bree with an E, and I upload a variety of content every week pertaining to TV shows, movies, pop culture, and controversial people and things. So if you're interested in any of that, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Also give this video a big thumbs up as it helps so much with the algorithm and making sure people find this video as well as my channel. For today's video, I'm going to be touching on a number of different things considering overarching themes in the franchise. We're also going to be looking into everything I got wrong, we all got wrong in part 1 for our predictions for part 2, and I know I got a lot wrong. We'll also be discussing the death of Jonathan Moore and what that truly means and what that looks like for Joe moving forward, as well as getting into some predictions for season 5 because, oh yeah, there's another season coming. For this video, I did enable chapters so you can skip around to parts of the video that interest you more or that you don't want to spend too much time on, though I do encourage you to watch all the way through as everything is interesting. But with all that said, let's get into the video. Across all seasons thus far, there has been this recurring theme of classism considering the rich, influential, and more recent term, nepo babies of society and their extreme privilege. In season 2, we saw this through the typical LA hipster scene, and in season 3, we were introduced to the suburban kind of mom-fluencer circle, and in season 4 again with the rich, elite, powerful class of Londoners. What's for certain is Joe has always pursued the rich girl with a somewhat spoiled upbringing whose friends are genuinely terrible, self-consumed people, and this season was no different. Joe, aka Jonathan Moore, found himself pursuing yet another rich, privileged, pretty girl with some kind of dark undertones and mysterious nature to her, along with a deeply disconnected, rude, pompous, rich group of friends. While assessing Joe's past partners and their respective friend groups' privilege and kind of social, economic well-being, I think it's also important to take a look at how Joe benefits from privilege of his own. The reality of the matter is Joe is a white man in America. He's also not too hard on the eyes. He's a man with a lot of charisma. He's very charming. He knows how to make people like him and thus trust him, thus manipulating others very easily and time again getting off scot-free. Is it scot-free or scotch-free? Another theme season 4 particularly touches on is the struggle between good and evil and accepting one's true self. Now we see this particularly through Joe as well as Kate in season 4. Joe starts off season 4 running from his past with love and the whole mess that transpired out of that situation to now creating a new life for himself as Jonathan Moore. Now while this all was a facade, an extreme plot twist we saw happen toward the end of season 4, for the most part, we as an audience are led to believe that Joe is really trying to do better and be better. I spoke about this in my last video on part 1 and how I felt that it was extremely refreshing seeing Joe trying to leave his murderous tendencies in the past. And so flash forwarding to the whole sinister reveal and that Joe was the eat the rich killer all along and the one and only person doing the killing, we see Joe finally fully accept that he is a monster and he has been the problem all along. For Kate, we see the same thing, the struggle between good and evil, as her father is this terrifyingly powerful man with the most extreme connections I've ever seen. He can easily get what he wants, whether that means putting a hit on one of his enemies or even just controlling every aspect of Kate's life. So it's no secret why Kate is running from her father, who is this very obvious terrible man who does this extremely dirty and shady business that results in the lives of others being dismantled, ruined, or taken in the process. What audiences soon figure out, however, is Kate isn't running from her dad because she's scared of turning into him. She's running from her dad because she knows deep down she already is him. So while Kate is off in London trying to run from her father or fully becoming her father, she too comes to this wicked realization that she is as equally bad as her father. In both these cases, Joe and Kate fully accept the true monsters that they are in this struggle between good and evil. So those were just a couple overarching themes that I've seen in the franchise as a whole, and specifically in season 4 that was very strongly highlighted and an extreme focal point that will be leading us into season 5. But now I want to discuss everything I got wrong, everything we got wrong pertaining to part 1 and our predictions for part 2, and I got a lot wrong. So the first thing I completely got wrong, and maybe we all overlooked, was who was truly the Eat the Rich killer. Now, I'll admit, after making my initial thoughts and reactions to part 1, I saw a lot of theories of people actually figuring out the plot twist of Reese being nothing but a figment of Joe's imagination, and that Joe was the Eat the Rich killer all along and was the one and only sole person doing the killing. This was such a terrifying and sinister realization for me before even watching the part 2, and then even when watching part 2, just watching it play out then was so unsettling and unnerving, seeing Joe snap, and I mean completely snap. Because in the past, Joe has always been conscious and aware of the heinous acts he was committing, the people he was hurting, and the damage he was doing. So to see him in part 2 have this full-on psychotic break and suffer from a couple mental illnesses actually, it was just extremely, like I said, unnerving, unsettling to watch. I was moving, uncomfy, very uncomfy in my seat. So after watching part 2, I wanted to look into Joe's sort of psychotic break and all of the mental illnesses or disorders Joe was suffering through. And the first that I found was this disorder called erotomania, having an unfolded belief that a person of a perceived higher social status, like a famous musician, actor, or even author in this case, having belief that that person is in love with you or has this deep connection with you that no one else has. Hence this whole delusion by Joe of Reese. And I think it's interesting now looking back at the season and seeing how they kind of hinted at or potentially foreshadowed the mental disorder Joe was suffering from in the episode about Kate and her gallery event, and how Phoebe was kidnapped and lured by her stalker. Now, Phoebe's stalker expressed to her how she felt that she was communicating to her through the TV and sending her messages basically, and that they had this undeniably deep connection and friendship. And first watching that episode, I felt like it was a random way to kind of frame another person for the murders of Reese, aka Joe. But now seeing the conclusion of part 2, it really wasn't quite as random as we maybe thought it was. Now, the other illness Joe is perceived to suffer from in the show is one that we are probably all familiar with. We've seen it in popular movies like Split, and that is a disorder called the dissociative identity disorder. This is a disorder characterized by 2 or more distinct personality states, and it's usually a reaction to trauma to help someone forget bad memories. I thought this was quite evident in the last few episodes as we visibly saw Joe checking in and out of the 2 realities that he created for himself. In one reality, the true reality, he had kidnapped and caged Mary Ann, while he constructed another reality for himself where he was protecting Kate and trying to evade doing Reese's dirty work. And I think the scene that truly did it for me, that made me finally scared of Joe Goldberg, was when he banged his head against the glass box that he was containing Mary Ann in, and you could just visibly see him transform. As I was watching it, you can kind of note how Joe's voice was just deeper and very disgruntled, and it was also scary hearing Joe then kind of say to Mary Ann that he was holding her there until the real Joe decided to kill her. and that was terrifying to me. Another thing I got wrong in season 4 was Nadia being potentially someone to look out for, and that she was involved in some dark and sinister way. The reason I felt this way is because Nadia had this very mysterious tie to Malcolm, Kate's ex who died, and with the addition of the letter she wrote him that she needed to urgently retrieve as she felt it would ruin her, I thought maybe she was involved in helping Reese frame Joe, but it appears that she simply did just have a little secret fling or relationship with Malcolm. But gosh, generally my heart just goes out to Nadia because Nadia went through it at the end there. Joe did her extremely dirty and framed her for the death of her own friend. But honestly, if it wasn't for Nadia's hunch about Professor Moore not being who he really says he is, Marianne would have starved to death and no one would have ever found out that Joe was holding her. She really gathered all this strong evidence against Joe in hopes of putting him behind bars, only to be put there herself. I think for the first time, I felt that Joe was this really, really bad person and incapable of any redemption at this point. Which leads me into my next point, that Joe has now completely and fully surrendered himself over to the dark side. He's accepted that he is a monster, and that is truly terrifying. But let's talk exactly about what this means. Throughout all seasons of You, Joe has always presented himself as a good guy with bad tendencies, a good guy who does very bad things, aka murdering people, but all in the name of love and protecting his women. And in each season, we've seen Joe struggle with this idea of being a murderer and doing all these bad things, yet still having good intentions and a somewhat good heart. And I think we especially saw this good-hearted Joe in the earlier seasons, as he kind of acted as a savior and played the good guy for the kid in his neighborhood. I can't remember his name, but either both he and his mom, or just his mom, or him himself, were being beaten by his stepfather or father. I can't remember the details. And then also again with Jenna Ortega's character, I believe this was all in season 1. But Joe truly wasn't all bad in the earlier seasons. He did have somewhat of a heart, and that was evident in how he treated those two kids in particular. And I think that's why we as an audience, or at least I myself, kind of struggled with strictly hating Joe. Because while yes, he was this very psychotic, narcissistic murderer, he also too had a heart of good intentions. He did good deeds. He was very charming and swore that he did everything in the name of love and protecting his women. Like, this man truly justified each of his killings, making him capable of rooting for. We watched as he killed on impulse and then frantically rushed to cover his tracks, which in turn made us stressed out and fearful of the possibility of him getting caught. So when he managed to not get caught, we let out this huge sigh of relief. We were in essence so connected to Joe as an audience for this reason, because we felt we were in it with him. We wanted him so badly to find his way to love and find the perfect woman, and if that meant killing people who got in the way of that, then so be it. We admittedly wanted him to succeed. But after season 4 and everything that went down, it's safe to say Joe doesn't have that same connection with the audience anymore. Joe's main struggle in this season was this idea of being identified and labeled as a murderer, when he felt in his heart that that is not who he truly was. As the plot twist was revealed, however, that Joe was the killer all along, Joe is then faced with this paralyzing and very harsh reality that he has been the problem all along. Joe realizes that he is a bad person finally. While Joe's initial reaction was acceptance and repentance of some sort, his attempt at taking his life was then followed by another realization that was far more dark and disturbing. In the final episode, as Joe looks out into the city of London, he is faced with the reflection of Reese. Now, we've quickly come to know Reese, especially in these last few episodes of season 4, as sort of Joe's psychotic, impulsive, narcissistic, murderous side. And in those last few moments when he's looking out and he sees the reflection of Reese staring back at him, you can see that he has truly accepted who he is. And I think that's the most terrifying part of this season, and something that I'm scared to see in season 5, as Joe has fully surrendered himself over to the dark side. Before we close out today's discussion on You Season 4, I wanted to open the floor for discussion about what we may see happen in Season 5 regarding the end of Season 4. From the ending of You Season 4 Part 2, it is clear that Joe Goldberg is not yet done terrorizing our screen. Joe's story has not yet finished, and I don't believe it will finish until Joe has been taken down completely. Now, as Joe has truly accepted that he is a bad person and a murderer, and now with Kate by his side, who took over her dad's legacy basically as well as his fortune, Joe is now completely unstoppable. In season 5, I'm actually hopeful to see a return of Nadia. Nadia is basically the only other person aside from Marianne who is still alive and can testify against Joe. While she does not have sufficient evidence enough to point Joe as a murderer, I still feel as though there is a hole in Joe's story, a missing piece to the puzzle that Nadia just needs to somehow figure out. I just hope that in season 5, somehow her trial gets picked up for a reinvestigation and that she is set free and is able to maybe work alongside Marianne to seek revenge and finally put the nail in the coffin on Joe's grave. Also in season 5, I'm interested to see just exactly how Joe and Kate's relationship either strengthens or deteriorates. The whole ending with Kate accepting Joe for all his wrongdoings and declaring to stand by his side eerily reminded me of the whole plot twist in season 2 of Love actually being a murderer as well, and also accepting Joe for his wrongdoings. Even in Joe and Love's season, with how similar they were and that they were practically Bonnie and Clyde, their relationship still did not work as there was so much dishonesty and trust between the two. So I'm interested to see in season 5 exactly what dynamic will define Joe and Kate's relationship. Will they become toxic? Will they turn on each other? But that wraps my thoughts on season 4, as well as my whole kind of breakdown and analysis of parts 1 and 2. Let me know your thoughts on this season as a whole. How did you feel about the ending? And what do you look forward to most in season 5? Me personally, I am ready for the downfall of Joe Goldberg. I cannot wait to see Joe's downfall. I also want to say, if you enjoyed today's video, definitely give it a big thumbs up, as well as subscribe for more videos like this where I do a breakdown and sort of analysis of your and my favorite TV shows. But with all that being said, guys, I'll see you in my next video. Bye!